Well, we have a warrant for your arrest, okay? So we're going to have to end up arresting you, and we're going to take you down to the jail today, okay?
I got some appointments. I suppose I can't.
You're not going to make those appointments, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
The woman in front of you is Mary. She looks like a confused, elderly woman, but do not let her appearance fool you. This woman is hiding a gruesome truth about brutal murder that took place all the way back in 1985. Mary didn't just commit a crime, she managed to escape justice and keep the dark truth hidden for almost 40 years. She lived a lifetime in the shadows, hoping the past would never catch up. But today, the running stops. She isn't here to confess, she is lying, deflecting, and deceiving investigators, desperate to escape one last time.
The district attorney's office is ready to file charges against you for homicide.
December 12, 1985. It was 6:30 in the morning, and Yvonne Miko was getting ready for work. She said goodbye to her daughter, Julie, and promised her she wouldn't be late coming home. But that promise would never be kept, for only seconds after Yvonne walked out the door, her daughter Julie heard a loud noise. Julie was very young at the time, and she didn't understand what the sound was, but when it happened again, she went outside. That is when she found her nightmare, seeing her mother lying on the stairs, blood scattered everywhere. Julie was terrified by the sight, freezing in panic, and she didn't know what to do. But she remembered her mother's advice. In an emergency, always call the police. With shaking hands, she picked up the phone and dialed 911, her voice trembling as she told the operator someone had killed her mother. Moments later, the police arrived at the scene and found Yvonne's body lying at the bottom of the stairs. She had been shot 3 times with a .22 caliber pistol in an execution-style killing, 3 shots to the head from close range. This wasn't a robbery, and the killer had stood directly in front of her and pulled the trigger, showing a massive amount of hatred. Detectives immediately declared it a homicide and began questioning Julie, needing to know exactly what she saw. Julie told them she heard the shots and, when she opened the door, she saw a figure running toward the parking lot. She couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman because the person was covered up, wearing a wool beanie, blue pants, and a gray jacket. Since the description was vague, investigators turned to Yvonne's friends and family to know if she had any enemies. But everyone said the same thing. Yvonne was a social, quiet woman who hated trouble. She had been separated from her husband for years and was living in the apartment, raising her 4 children. However, they learned she was in a relationship with a man named Jack Owen. As they processed the crime scene, things started to develop, and detectives found a specific set of shoe prints near the body. But the biggest clue was hidden inside Yvonne's purse, where they found a note with a single name written on it: Mary Jo. After a brief investigation, the pieces started coming together, and it turned out Jack was in a romantic relationship with Yvonne, but he was also seeing Mary Jo, playing a dangerous game, unable to choose between them, bouncing back and forth between Mary and Yvonne. And the evidence of that jealousy was starting to pile up, as detectives learned that just 2 days before the murder, Jack held a birthday party. Yvonne was there, celebrating with him, but Mary was not invited. Yvonne's daughters told police that Mary would frequently call their mother, threatening her and telling her to stay away from Jack. But the most chilling detail came from Julie, who recalled that just 1 week before the murder, a stranger had called the house. The stranger asked specifically what time Yvonne left for work, which were dangerous red flags. But the detectives decided to play it cool, and they didn't want to rush, so first, they brought Jack in for questioning. Jack was cooperative and established a strong alibi, proving he was out of the area when the murder took place. He told them that the last time he saw Yvonne was at his birthday party the day before, and everything had been normal. He admitted that he had been juggling both women for 8 years, but recently, he had made a choice. He was leaving Mary to be with Yvonne, and with Jack cleared, the target on Mary's back grew larger. Investigators now viewed her as the prime suspect, believing she killed Yvonne in a fit of rage and envy. It was time to confront her, so detectives arrived at Mary's home, but she didn't seem nervous. In fact, she welcomed them in, polite, hospitable, and incredibly cooperative, admitting to the relationship with Jack. When asked about the victim, she claimed she knew who Yvonne was, but had never actually met her face-to-face. She admitted to speaking with her on the phone only once, 3 years ago, to discuss Jack's behavior, but insisted the call was civil. When detectives pressed her about the recent breakup, Mary shrugged it off, telling them this wasn't the first time. Jack was moody. He would leave, disappear for months, and always come back, so she claimed she wasn't angry because she was used to it. Her story was calm and consistent, but investigators had one specific card to play. They had records showing Mary owned a .22 caliber pistol, the exact same caliber used to kill Yvonne. When they asked her about it, Mary didn't flinch, admitting the records were true, but claimed she no longer had the gun. She told them she had traded it for a rifle a long time ago, and to prove it, she even showed them the rifle. Finally, she claimed that on the morning of the murder, she wasn't even in the state. The problem was, Mary had no proof of her alibi, but the police had no proof she was lying either. They scoured the neighborhood for witnesses, but found nothing, and every lead hit a dead end. Slowly, the investigation stalled, the case went cold, and years turned into decades. In 2009, investigators tried to use modern DNA technology, sending all the evidence from the crime scene to the lab. They hoped for a breakthrough, but the results were disappointing, and there was nothing usable. The file was closed again, and it seemed Yvonne's killer would never be found, but that changed in 2021. A new cold case unit was formed, and a fresh team of investigators picked up Yvonne's file. As they read through the old notes, they felt something had been missed, so they decided to start from scratch. They began re-examining every single piece of evidence with a fine-toothed comb and went back to the neighborhood, knocking on doors again. They planned to re-interview the key players, Mary and Jack, but immediately they hit a wall. Jack had passed away that very same year, which was a blow to the investigation, but the team refused to give up. Instead, they pivoted and decided to speak with Jack's widow, Linda, and that decision would crack the case wide open. Linda had a story to tell, one that painted a terrifying picture of Mary. She told detectives she met Jack in 1989, 4 years after Yvonne's murder, bonding over their shared love of horses. But even then, Jack hadn't changed. He was still seeing Mary, playing the two women against each other just like before. But eventually, he made his choice, leaving Mary and marrying Linda. Mary thought it was just another phase and expected him to come crawling back, like he always did. But when she realized this time was real, that Jack had actually married someone else, she snapped. Her rage turned violent, and she broke into the couple's home, smashing their wedding photos and destroying their property. But it didn't stop at vandalism, for Linda started receiving death threats. She also got phone calls from a strange voice, sounding like a man, warning her that if she knew what was good for her, she would leave Jack. While terrorizing Linda, Mary tried to keep up appearances and even married another man, hoping to make Jack jealous. She thought it would bring him back to her, but it didn't work, and her new husband quickly realized he was just a pawn. He told police that Mary was obsessed with Jack and Linda, spending her time stalking them and following their every move. Realizing how dangerous she was, he divorced her before he got dragged further into her madness. To the detectives, the pattern was undeniable. Mary wasn't just a jealous ex, she was a stalker with a history of escalation. But they needed more to connect her to 1985, so they tracked down Yvonne's son, James. James revealed a chilling detail about the months leading up to his mother's death. He told them that strange phone calls had started coming to the house, sometimes 3 times a day. The caller would try to disguise their voice, asking aggressive questions about Yvonne and her boyfriend, Jack. The most terrifying part was that the harassment continued relentlessly right up until the day of the murder. And the moment Yvonne took her last breath, the calls stopped. To this day, James doesn't know for sure who was on the other end of the line, but he has always suspected it was Mary. Detectives agreed Mary was the prime suspect, but suspicion is not evidence, and they had no smoking gun and no witnesses. Months passed, and the investigation seemed to be stalling yet again, so with no other options left, investigators realized they had to go to the source. They had to look Mary in the eyes, so in January 2023, 2 detectives flew to Arizona to confront her at her home. At first, Mary tried to dodge them, claiming she was busy and had urgent errands to run, trying to end the interaction quickly. The detectives left, but they didn't give up, and they returned the next day, and this time, they weren't leaving without answers.
I'm wondering if you can talk to me a little bit about Jack's family, and more specifically, back in like 85.
During the interview, a detective started softly, asking her about her history with Jack. Mary explained they met in the mid-70s at a horse riding event, and it started as a friendship, she said, but eventually turned into love. As the detectives probed deeper into Jack's life, Mary revealed something telling, speaking about him with a mix of intimacy and bitterness. She claimed Jack was unemployed for a long time and had serious money problems. She insisted that he only married Linda for her money to fix his financial situation. But then, she slipped up, mentioning that Jack had died 2 years prior. This seemingly small detail was a massive revelation, proving that Mary had been keeping tabs on Jack. She had been tracking his life and even his death all these years later, and the obsession hadn't faded, it was just dormant. The detectives decided it was time to turn up the heat, so they asked about her relationship with Yvonne and Linda. Mary played the role of the innocent woman perfectly, speaking calmly and even saying she was heartbroken when she heard about Yvonne's murder. But the investigators had an ace up their sleeve. Having received a tip from one of Mary's friends, the friend claimed that shortly after the murder, Mary had asked a man named Jim Moore to burn a bundle of clothes for her. Now, the reality was that the police had already checked this lead, and when they interviewed Jim Moore, he didn't recall this happening. The information was shaky at best, but the detectives decided to use it as a bluff to see how Mary would react. It worked, and the moment they mentioned the burning clothes, Mary's demeanor cracked. She became visibly agitated, angrily denying the accusation, and the sweet, confused old lady act vanished. Her tone turned sharp and defensive, and the detectives knew they had struck a nerve. Sensing she was cornered, they asked her to take a polygraph test, but she refused. They asked for a DNA sample, and she refused that too, then shut down completely, stating she wouldn't speak without a lawyer. The interview was over, and the detectives had to walk away empty-handed. But they weren't going back to square one. They now had a focused suspect, and they had a plan. They knew there was unidentified DNA found at the crime scene, DNA they believed belonged to the killer. They just needed Mary's DNA to compare it, but since she refused to give it voluntarily, they had to build a case. They needed a case strong enough to arrest her first, so they reconstructed the case using old interviews and physical evidence. They reanalyzed the shoe prints found near the body and determined they were a perfect match for Mary's shoe size. It took 10 months of grueling work, but they finally built a case solid enough for a judge. On November 13, 2023, an arrest warrant was issued for Mary Jo on charges of first-degree murder.
So this detective right here, she's going to place you in handcuffs and she's going to search you, okay? So you are under arrest. If you can just step down. Thank you, ma'am.
Once she was in custody, the law was no longer on her side regarding her privacy. They took her fingerprints and, crucially, a swab of her DNA, comparing it to the sample from the 1985 crime scene. It was a match. The trial began on December 11, 2023, and lasted only 2 weeks, with over 30 witnesses taking the stand to testify against her. The jury didn't need long. They saw past the age and the frailty, and they saw a cold-blooded killer. Mary Jo, at 81 years old, was found guilty of the murder of Yvonne Miko, a crime committed 38 years prior. She was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 19 years. A life sentence in every practical sense. And that brings us to the end of the story. See you in another video. Over and out.